There's a certain kind of nostalgia that only exists when you grew up in the 1990s. Not the filtered, manufactured kind that sells products, but the kind that feels like touching something real. It's that feeling when you hear a song from a scratchy CD, see a pixelated screensaver, or remember what it felt like to wait, to actually wait for things, for the dial-up to connect, for your favorite show to air, for your photos to develop. It wasn't frustration back then, it was anticipation, and maybe that's what shaped us most, the waiting. Most people don't understand that. They'll look at millennials who came of age in the 90s and assume we're just clinging to childhood, drowning in nostalgia for cartoons and boy bands. But for those of us who grew up then, the 1990s wasn't just a decade, it was the last moment before everything changed, before the internet swallowed the world whole, before everyone became a brand, before childhood was documented in real time. We lived in the space between analog and digital, and that tension made us different. Maybe it started with Saturday mornings, the glow of the television, the crackle of cereal in a bowl, and 3 solid hours where nothing else mattered. No notifications, no group chats, no endless scroll. Just you and the screen and a kind of focus that feels impossible now. For 90s kids, those spaces felt like survival in their own way. You had to be present because there was nothing else pulling at your attention. So we built an inner world instead, a world that was vivid, imaginative, deeply personal. That's where the 90s became more than nostalgia. It became the foundation of how we see the world. Psychologists say that people who grew up in the 1990s occupy a unique psychological space. We're the bridge generation, old enough to remember life before smartphones, young enough to adapt when technology exploded. That means our brains were wired in 2 different worlds. We learned patience in a slow world, then had to learn speed in a fast one. We knew boredom, real boredom, the kind that forced creativity. And that boredom shaped us in ways we're only now beginning to understand. But let's be honest, it's not just about technology. There's something deeper, something almost spiritual about it. The 90s was the last decade where you could truly disappear. You'd leave your house in the morning and no one knew where you were until you came home. No GPS, no Find My Friends, no constant check-ins. You were just gone, out in the world, unsupervised, untracked. And in that freedom, we learned something crucial: how to be alone with ourselves, how to navigate without a map, how to solve problems without Googling the answer. It's strange, isn't it? How a person can grow up surrounded by people, playing outside, riding bikes through the neighborhood, but still feel like they had more solitude than kids today. Because even when we were together, there was space to think, space to wonder, space to be bored enough that imagination had room to breathe. That's the quiet magic of the 90s childhood. It wasn't overscheduled, it wasn't optimized, and it certainly wasn't performed for an audience. We often forget how different the social pressure was back then. Yes, there were cliques and popularity contests and all the cruelty of adolescence, but it stayed at school. When you went home, you were free. There was no Instagram to remind you of the party you weren't invited to, no Snapchat to quantify your friendships, no comment section to measure your worth. The social world had boundaries, and those boundaries protected something essential in us: the ability to reset, to recover, to exist outside the gaze of judgment. There's an old psychological concept called unstructured play, and 90s kids were the last generation to truly experience it. We didn't have playdates scheduled weeks in advance. We just went outside and figured it out, built forts, invented games, explored the woods, made up entire universes with nothing but sticks and imagination. Psychologists now know that this kind of play is crucial for developing problem-solving skills, emotional regulation, and creativity. It teaches children that they have agency, that they can create their own fun, that boredom is not an emergency. Think about it. When you're constantly entertained, your identity starts to fragment. You become a consumer of content rather than a creator of experience. But when you're bored, when there's nothing to do and no screen to fill the void, you're forced to turn inward, to imagine, to create, to become. And that's what 90s kids learned early: how to generate meaning from nothing. Of course, there's a fine line between nostalgia and idealization. The 90s wasn't perfect, but here's what's true. People who grew up then often have a different relationship with technology. We're not native to it, but we're fluent in it. We remember what life was like before, so we can see what's been lost. We feel the weight of constant connectivity because we knew what it felt like to be unreachable. And that creates a strange kind of wisdom, a skepticism, a quiet resistance to the idea that newer always means better. When psychologists study generational differences, they find something fascinating. 90s kids, particularly older millennials, score higher on measures of media literacy and critical thinking about technology. It's not because we're smarter, it's because we're translators. We lived in both worlds. We remember handwritten notes passed in class, and we learned to text. We knew encyclopedias, and we watched Google take over. We didn't grow up with algorithms curating our reality, so we learned to curate it ourselves. Think about the times you've had your clearest sense of self. They probably didn't come from scrolling through feeds or binge watching content. They came from those quiet 90s moments, lying on your bedroom floor listening to a CD on repeat, reading the same book 3 times, rewinding a VHS tape to watch your favorite scene again. That repetition, that depth of engagement, it shaped how we process emotion and meaning. We learned that value comes from going deep, not wide. But here's what's ironic. Many 90s kids carry a secret guilt about their nostalgia. They feel like they're being dismissed as out-of-touch millennials who won't shut up about dial-up internet and blockbuster video. Social media makes it worse. Endless memes about how back in my day makes us sound old and irrelevant. But the truth is, what we're mourning isn't just the past, it's a way of being, a pace of life, a texture of experience that's been lost. There's something deeply human about needing to remember where you came from. In ancient times, elders would tell stories to preserve wisdom. Today, 90s kids do it through nostalgia. We're not just reminiscing, we're trying to hold on to something that made us who we are. The slowness, the tangibility, the presence. These aren't trivial things. They're psychological anchors in a world that moves too fast. And here's the psychology behind it. When you grow up in the 90s, you develop what researchers call temporal awareness. You're uniquely conscious of before and after, before social media and after, before smartphones and after, before everyone was online and after the digital takeover. That awareness creates both gift and burden. The gift is perspective. The burden is feeling caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. But not everyone understands this. Sometimes people will say things like, "You just need to move on," or "stop living in the past." What they don't realize is that remembering the 90s doesn't mean rejecting the present. Some of the most important identity work happens when we look back, reflecting, understanding, integrating who we were with who we've become. And people who grew up in the 90s aren't stuck in nostalgia, they're mining it for meaning. There's also a psychological comfort in shared memory. The brain loves connection through recognition. When 90s kids find each other, there's an instant shorthand, a reference, a song, a commercial jingle, and suddenly you're understood. For someone who grew up then, this shared culture becomes sacred. It's not superficial. It's emotional bonding through collective experience. Every small reference is a way of saying, "I was there too. I remember what that felt like." Yet in a world obsessed with innovation, that kind of backward glance feels rebellious. We're taught that to be relevant, we must always look forward, always embrace the new, always optimize and upgrade. But 90s kids quietly challenge that idea. They prove that wisdom doesn't only come from progress. Sometimes it comes from remembering what worked, from recognizing what was lost in the rush toward more, faster, bigger. And maybe that's why 90s kids often have such a rich inner life. When you spend your formative years with less external stimulation, imagination has space to expand. You begin to see that entertainment isn't something you consume, it's something you create. You notice the poetry in analog things, the satisfying click of a cassette tape, the ritual of rewinding, the weight of a physical object in your hands. There's meaning there, quiet but undeniable. Some people will never understand that kind of attachment. To them, it seems silly to feel emotional about old technology or discontinued snacks. But for those who grew up in the 90s, these objects aren't just things, they're time capsules. They're proof that we existed in a specific moment that can never be recreated. And there's something profound in that. It teaches us that nothing lasts forever, that change is constant, that what feels permanent will one day be obsolete. There's a beautiful paradox hidden inside people who grew up in the 90s. They're often labeled as cynical or jaded, the generation that invented irony as a defense mechanism. But the truth is, they feel things deeply. Every shift in culture, every loss of something tangible, every replacement of human connection with digital convenience, it all leaves a mark. And when the world moves too fast, their instinct isn't to keep pace mindlessly. It's to pause and ask, but what are we losing? You can tell a lot about a generation by what they miss. 90s kids miss physicality, CDs you could hold, mixtapes you made by hand, notes folded into triangles, photos you printed and taped to walls. Each of these required effort, intention, time, and that effort meant something. It meant the things you created and shared had weight. They couldn't be deleted or unsent. They were permanent, and in that permanence, relationships felt more real. When psychologists study the link between nostalgia and well-being, they find something profound. Nostalgia isn't escapism. It's a psychological resource. When people reflect on meaningful memories from the past, they report feeling more connected, more optimistic, and more anchored in their sense of self. For 90s kids, nostalgia serves a purpose. It reminds us of who we were before the world told us who to be. It reconnects us with a version of ourselves that was more present, more curious, more genuinely engaged. Think of all the cultural moments that defined the 90s. They required participation, not just consumption. You had to wait all week for your show. You had to go to the video store and hope your movie was in stock. You had to call your friend's house and talk to their parents first. Every interaction had friction, and that friction created presence. You couldn't multitask your way through life. You had to be there, fully, or you'd miss it. People who grew up in the 90s have learned something powerful from that experience. That attention is finite. That distraction has a cost. That the best moments in life can't be captured, only lived. Because when you spend your childhood without the ability to document everything, you learn to experience things for their own sake, not for the story you'll tell later, not for the likes you'll get, but for the pure, unmediated feeling of being alive in that moment. Still, the 90s wasn't without its challenges. Many kids growing up then faced their own struggles with identity, belonging, and self-worth. But there was a certain resilience that came from navigating those struggles without the internet amplifying every insecurity. When you felt like an outsider, you found your people slowly, carefully, in real life. Maybe through a band t-shirt someone was wearing, maybe through a borrowed book, maybe through a conversation that happened because you weren't both staring at phones. And this is what psychology tells us. People who grew up in the 90s developed a particular kind of social intelligence. They learned to read rooms, to interpret tone and body language, to navigate conflict without the buffer of a screen. They understand that communication is more than words. It's presence, timing, vulnerability. These are skills that can't be taught through texts. They're learned through the messy, awkward, beautiful process of being face-to-face with another human being. The 90s wasn't just a decade, it was a doorway between two worlds. And those of us who walked through it carry both sides within us, the analog and the digital, the slow and the fast, the before and the after. We're translators of experience, keepers of a time that's gone but not forgotten, living proof that how you grow up shapes everything that follows. And maybe that's the real gift, not just the memories themselves, but what they taught us. That patience has value, that presence is powerful, that imagination matters, that some of the best moments in life happen when no one's watching, when nothing's being recorded, when you're just alive, fully alive, in a world that hasn't yet learned to document everything. That's the beauty of growing up in the 1990s. We learned to be without needing to be seen, and in a world obsessed with visibility, that might be the most radical thing of all.